Hi guys, and welcome to today's quick fix. You all enjoyed our shadow painting or getting into shadow painting tutorial last week, and now we are taking that one step further by looking at textures that can be made with shadow. So that's when you have an object that before the shadow was put on it, you might necessarily not know what the kind of texture is. And this is all about how adding just some simple painted shadow can really help not only bring that thing off the page, but give it a texture. So we'll start up here. I've drawn out some pencil shapes. We've got a cube, a flat circle, a little cat, and jelly on a plate, or jello if you are in America. I'm going to begin with this one here where we have very clear, sharp, angled, different faces on a shape. So we're going to paint the shadow in very defined sections here because we have a very angular shape. So I'm going to paint a very sort of dilute shape here on our cube, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a completely consistent colour all over. But what is important is that we leave that to dry 100% before we paint that bit in, because we're going to paint that bit of shadow just a slightly different concentration, and that is going to give us a very strong sense of where the light's coming from. I'm going to leave the top of it completely unpainted, so we'll see that the light is bouncing off the top, but the concentration of how dark we paint that bit there will show really nicely how we've made that jump off the page. Now I've painted that quite nice and sparingly, so I'm going to now pick up some slightly more concentrated colour from the palette. I'm just going to fill up and colour in the sides here, and then getting carefully to the edge. It's the joy of watercolour, is it does dry nice and quickly if you're not overloading the page with too much water. Okay, so that has given us a really nice 3D effect by having 3 different levels of colour on the face of that shape, and that also says to me that the light source is very much coming from above, maybe a little bit from in front as well. So I'm going to add just a very little bit of shadow that just maybe comes around the back as well. So that shape has still got a very smooth, flat texture, but I'm going to turn this into a dimpled golf ball. So I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush. I've got a 4/10 here, and what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm just going to, I've decided my light source is coming from that side, so this side is going to have far more shadow on it. I'm going to begin by painting in little C curves around the edge here, and as they get lower they're going to become sort of more fully formed circles. And I'm just going to sort of fill up this side of the golf ball with divots, but now they're just going to get a little bit fainter as they come across the ball and as they get a bit higher as well. Until they almost sort of fade off into nothing. But this is only half the story, because at the moment they all look quite sort of disparate. Just trying to do a few sort of underneath as well. So by the time they come around this side, they're very, very faint, and they're almost picking up the light. So that's already given us a sense that the light is coming from that side. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use a clean wet brush and a tiny weeny bit of shadow, just a little bit. And I'm now going to sweep that brush down that side, which not only gives us more shadow, but it also just sort of ties in those funny little shapes that can look a bit rubbish, to be honest, when you first start painting them. So not too many brush strokes, but in doing that, we just sort of smooth down and bring together something that has a dimpled textured surface, whereas this side they're just little U's that are just cupping the light. Okay, over to a fluffy cat. Now at the moment I've drawn the cat fairly smoothly, but if I start to add shadow, I can start to bring out the texture. So by dabbing the brush, that also it will just sort of come out over the pencil line a little bit, but it's all mainly about finding the texture of the fur in the drawing. So I'm leaving little bits of unpainted space, but now as we get sort of further down where there's probably more shadow there, then we fill in the colour a bit more intensely. And again, we're creating a lovely texture. And I haven't forgotten about that collar and the bell. What's quite useful is that collar is all smooth and we need to get a contrast. So I'm just painting in shadow just in between those pores there. And now on this side, even though we've got the light source coming from here, just have a very gentle bit of shadow. And there we've got a lovely fluffy cat by dabbing the brush and allowing for a little bit of unpainted space. Now in contrast, the collar and the bell are very smooth, so I will paint in very smooth brush strokes. Maybe just a little bit under the chin there. But then we can just fluff it out on the rest of the cat body there. And finally we've got a sort of a wobbly, undulating shape. So it's not quite so defined as the cube there, but it does have sort of shapes within there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slightly more smoothly and less completely paint in the sections. So I'm not sort of like with the cube painting in one section 100% and filling it in and waiting for it to dry. I'm allowing these to slightly ease into each other. So starting on a dry section and then just really taking off what water I've got or what colour I've got and just allowing a little bit of a smooth blend, but leaving little bits of unpainted space to allow for some sort of smooth integration. These are really useful exercises to have a go at when getting used to painting shadow. If you haven't already had a go at my first shadow painting tutorial, getting started with shadow, have a look at that and then come along to this one. Thanks so much for watching, and I really hope that was helpful.